Tonight, we speak of pain, not to frighten you, not to worry you. We speak of pain because pain is one of the most honest guests that ever visits a human heart, and very few of us have been taught how to sit with it. There is a kind of peace we were promised when we were young, the kind that comes when everything finally goes right, when the work is done, when the person you love stays, when the body does not ache, when the night is quiet and nothing hurts. But if you have lived very long at all, you know that this peace is fragile. It depends on 1,000 small things going well. And life does not always let 1,000 small things go well. Life hurts. That is not a cynic's opinion. That is an old observation made by every wise tradition that ever looked at a human being honestly. Life hurts because we lose, because we age, because people leave, because bodies break, because plans collapse, because the mail brings bad news, because the phone rings at the wrong hour, because love does not always outlast the weather. And tonight, we are not here to pretend otherwise. Tonight we are here to discover something stranger and more beautiful. There is a peace that does not depend on life being kind. There is a peace you can carry into the middle of your worst day. There is a peace that life cannot break, because it does not live in your circumstances. It lives in you. This is a very old promise. The Buddha spoke of it. The Zen masters of the mountains lived by it, and they wrapped it in stories, the way mothers wrap bread in cloth, so that it would survive the journey from one generation to the next. Tonight you will hear 3 of those stories, not as lectures, as companions. Slow, quiet, unhurried stories, told the way a river tells time. You do not need to remember anything. You do not need to take notes. You do not need to fix anything while you listen. The chair is not a classroom. The night is not a test. There is only a voice and old stories and the quiet space between the words where healing likes to happen on its own. If you are carrying something heavy tonight, a grief, a fear, a disappointment, a hurt that keeps returning, you are not alone in it. Every person who has ever loved has carried something heavy. The question is not whether the weight comes. The question is how you hold it. And tonight, an old teacher, a tiger, and a gardener will show you, in their quiet ways, that the weight does not have to crush you. That there is a way to stand inside your own pain and still be standing still. So settle in. Let the day fall away from your shoulders. Close your eyes if that is comfortable, or let them rest on the images as they drift. Breathe in, slowly. Breathe out, more slowly still. There is nowhere to go. There is nothing to fix. There is only this. And the first story we will share is about a man who lived at the top of a mountain, in a cave no bigger than a grave. A man who one night found his cave filled with monsters. That man had a name. His name was Milarepa. There was once a man named Milarepa who lived a very long time ago, high in the cold mountains of Tibet. His name means one who hears white cotton, because even in the harshest winters he wore nothing but a single thin robe of white cotton. He was a meditator, not the kind who sits in a comfortable room with cushions and incense. The kind who lives alone in a stone cave, with only the wind and the snow for company. Milarepa had come to the mountains the hard way. In his youth, he had done terrible things. He had lost his father young, and the family had been deceived, cheated out of everything they owned. His mother, his sister, and he had been left with nothing, hungry, humiliated, sold into the margins of their own village. And Milarepa had burned with a cold fire of revenge. He learned dark magic, and he used it. He buried his enemies under avalanches and danced on the ruins. He hurt people. He ended lives. But the revenge did not heal him. It never heals anyone. It only opens a door through which the whole sky of guilt comes pouring in. And Milarepa, the man who had once destroyed others, came to understand that the person he had destroyed the most was himself. So he left everything. He found a teacher, and the teacher, in the old way, gave him almost nothing at first except work. Build a tower. Tear it down. Build it higher. Carry stones until his back wept. It was a kind of purification, the scrubbing of a soul. It was the removal, layer by layer, of the armor of guilt and pride he had wrapped himself in. And then, when the teacher saw that the young man was ready, he sent him to a cave, high in the mountains, to sit alone and to look into his own mind. That is where our story truly begins. So Milarepa climbed into his cave. It was small. It held one body, one cushion made of straw, and one small fire for tea. Outside, the snow was 3 men deep. Inside, there was silence and cold and the sound of his own breathing. He meditated there, high above the world. The days passed like slow, dark animals. The weeks folded into months. And the mountain made him one promise. You will be left alone, here, with nothing but yourself. But the mountain did not keep that promise. One night, as the wind pressed against the mouth of the cave, and the fire burned low, Milarepa became aware that he was not alone. He did not need to turn to know it. He felt it, the way you feel a presence in a dark room, a weight in the air. And slowly, out of the shadows at the edge of the cave, the monsters came. Not all at once. First one. It wore the shape of a hulking beast with eyes like burning coals, its breath rattling in its throat. Then another. A thing crouched almost to the floor, with long claws dragging on the stone. Then a third. Then so many that the cave seemed to thicken with them. The monsters of the cave had no master. They were not sent by any enemy. They were not demons with an agenda, marching toward a goal. They were older than that, darker than that. They were the uninvited guests of every human mind. Fear, guilt, shame, the memory of harm done and harm received, the dread of the empty future, the long grief that sleeps in the bones. And Milarepa, who had faced avalanches and enemies and the ruin of his family, felt his heart turn cold. Now, Milarepa himself, when he later told this story, because he did tell it, he told it to his students with a smile. He told them what he did that first night. What we all do. He tried to drive the demons out. He tried spells. This was a man who had once been a master of the dark arts. He knew every charm and every incantation for dispelling evil. He began to chant, great rolling words of power, the old words meant to banish the unholy. And the cave rang with his voice. But the monsters did not leave. They did not even flinch. They sat there, in the dark, watching him, as if waiting for him to remember something. So he tried willpower. He told himself that they were not real, that they were only the suggestions of a tired mind. He commanded them to go. He rose to his feet and pointed at them with a shaking hand. He shouted at them, the way you shout at a dog that will not stop barking. Be gone from this place. But the monsters only leaned closer, and now they were grinning. And here is the terrible, human truth of that moment, the truth that the monsters were trying to show him. Every effort to push the fear away only fed it. Every spell he cast confirmed that they were worth fearing. Every shout told them their power. The more he fought the darkness, the darker the room grew. Because the dark was made of his own fighting. The monsters were growing fat on his effort to kill them. Milarepa sat back down in the straw, exhausted. The fire was almost gone. The cold was coming in. And in that moment of exhaustion, of total surrender, when he had done everything he knew how to do, and nothing had worked, something loosened in him. He stopped trying to defeat the demons. He stopped trying to banish them. He stopped trying to argue with them. He stopped trying to pretend they were not there. For the first time in his life, in a cave full of monsters, he simply stopped trying to be the enemy of his own fear. And then, instead of shouting, instead of chanting, instead of pushing, he did the hardest thing that had ever been asked of him. He spoke to the monsters, gently, in his own voice. And he said, "If you have come to see me, then welcome. You honor my home. This cave is small, my fire is low, and my tea is cold. But there is enough of me to share. Come, sit with me. Let us drink tea together." At that moment of total surrender, the monsters changed. It was not the magic of a spell. It was not the force of a will. It was the quiet, immovable strength of a man who had finally stopped fearing what he could not control. And as Milarepa looked at his monsters, really looked at them, he saw what they had always been. They were not separate. They were not visitors from another world. They were the knots in the rope of his own history. They were the guilt he had refused to hold, the shame he had refused to name, the fear he had refused to look at. They were his own mind, turned against itself, wearing masks. And the moment his heart opened to them, the moment he said, "Come and sit," the masks did not matter anymore. He made tea. Not special tea, just tea. And in the light of the little fire, he sat with his own darkness the way you sit with an old guest, and the darkness that had filled his cave, that had terrorized him, that had grown fat on his terror, simply dissolved. Not destroyed, dissolved, because it had never existed to be destroyed. It had existed to be welcomed. That night, Milarepa slept deeply, in a cave that had been full of monsters. He slept the sleep of a man who has finally made peace with his own mind. And from that night forward, he was never afraid of the dark again. Not because the dark never came. It always comes, to everyone. But because he had learned the one thing the dark cannot survive, the courage to invite it in for tea. Now, let us put down this story for a moment, and look at it the way we look at a riverbed, to see what lies in the water. Each of us has a cave. Yours might not be made of stone, but it is just as high, just as cold, just as private. Your cave is the place you go at night when the world goes quiet, the place where the thoughts that you managed so well by day finally stand up and start talking. And each of us has monsters. What are the monsters in your cave? They have names. You know some of them by heart. There is the monster of the ache that will not heal, the body that carries its old grieving quietly in crowded rooms. There is the monster of the loss you were told to move on from, but your heart never received the message. There is the monster of the mistake you keep replaying, the word you cannot take back, the door you walked through without looking. There is the monster of the future, the cold fear of what might be coming, the doctor's appointment, the letter, the silence that stretches for too long. And when those monsters come, what do? What we all do? You fight them. You tell yourself to be strong, and the telling makes your shoulders tight, and the tightness is fear wearing armor. You argue with them. You go over the memory again and again, trying to win an argument that was over years ago. You push them away. You distract yourself in the bright rooms of your phone, your work, your plans. And for a little while, they go quiet. But they never leave. And here is what Milarepa understood in that cave, that every saint and every sage has understood, and that we are all slow to learn. The monster you fight is the monster you feed. Rejection, when you wrestle it all night, does not leave. It grows teeth. Grief, when you forbid it from visiting, does not die. It moves in. Fear, when you shout at it, does not obey. It simply listens, and gets louder because it knows it matters. The story is offering you a different way, not the way of fighting, the way of the tea. Tonight, could you speak to your monsters the way Milarepa spoke to his? Could you say, with a hand that has stopped shaking, "I am not going to fight you tonight. I am too tired, and I have been too tired for a long time. I see you. You have been following me for years, and I have never once looked at you. Tonight I will look. Come, sit, drink. This is not weakness. This is the strongest act a human being can perform. It is far easier to push a sorrow away than to turn toward it and say, I see you. It is far easier to run from a fear than to sit on the floor with it and share the dark. To invite your pain in for tea is not to surrender to it. It is to stop letting it run the house. When you stop fighting a thing, you stop giving it your power. And the monster, our old friend, our old shadow, cannot stand in the light of a heart that has finally stopped hating it. There is a teaching that says, look at the thing you fear, and it will change. Not because the thing changes, but because you change the room it appears in. Fear shrinks in the presence of a mind that has stopped feeding it. And the mind that has stopped feeding it is the mind that has simply said, I will not be afraid of being afraid tonight. So if the monsters come to you tonight, and they may, as they always do, you know what to do. You know the old Tibetan way. You do not need bells. You do not need the spells. You only need a heart brave enough to say, come in. The fire is small. The tea is lukewarm. But we can sit in the dark together and see what the morning does with us. And that, my friend, is where the peace that life cannot break begins. Not in the absence of monsters. In tea with monsters. Let me tell you a little more about that cave, because the story is not finished and the stones of it still have something to teach us. After that night, the monsters did not vanish forever in the old tale. They returned from time to time. The cave was not redeemed once and then made clean forever. Nothing in this life is. But something had changed between Milarepa and the dark, and that something is the real treasure of the story. The second time the monsters came, it is said, Milarepa no longer chanted at them. He no longer shouted. He no longer even fought. He looked at them across the small fire, and he said, quietly, you again. And then he went back to his breath. He did not make great drama of it. He did not run out into the snow. He did not wake the mountain. He simply acknowledged the arrival, the way you acknowledge an old neighbor passing by your window, and then he returned to the one thing he actually needed to do, which was to sit and to be. Can you feel how different that is from fighting? When the fear arrives and you say, you again, it loses its entrance, its drama, its power to take your whole night hostage. It becomes what it always was, a passing shape in the cave of your mind, over which you are no longer willing to give away your peace. And there is a gentleness to this that deserves your attention, because most of us, when we think about dealing with pain, think about destruction. We want the pain gone. We want the grief amputated. We want the fear removed like a splinter. But Milarepa's tea table holds a different medicine. You do not have to destroy your darkness in order to be free of it. You only have to stop feeding it. You only have to stop being afraid of it. If you take away the fuel of resistance, the fire of suffering burns low on its own, and what is left is just warmth, just the ordinary color of being alive. Let us be very practical, because a teaching that cannot be carried out of a cave and into a kitchen is only a decoration. Tonight, when the fear comes to you, you need not perform the whole ritual of the old yogi, but you can borrow 3 small moves from his tea table. First, name your monster. Give it a shape. Say to yourself, this is fear of the illness. This is grief for my mother. This is shame about the money. This is dread of tomorrow. Naming a thing takes it from the shadows, where it is huge, and places it in the light, where it has a size you can see. And what has a size you can see is a thing you can hold. Second, breathe it in. This is the counterintuitive secret that every meditator learns. Do not push the fear out. Let it in. Let it in with your breath, the way you let in cold air, knowing the house will warm it. Breathe right into the place where the fear lives, the chest, the throat, the belly, and let your body practice, inside the fear, the small act of staying open. Third, offer it the tea. Say, in your own words, the words that Milarepa used, I have been fighting you for years, and I am tired. Tonight, I will sit with you instead. And then sit. Attend to it the way you would attend to a guest, not to entertain it, but to be present with it, and watch what happens to the thing you were so afraid of. I will tell you what happens, because it is one of the most reliable miracles in all of human experience. The fear that you stop fighting becomes a fear you can breathe in. The grief that you stop suppressing becomes a grief you can carry without collapsing. The pain that you stop wrestling becomes a pain that softens at the edges, the way ice softens in the mouth of a warm spring. The monsters of your cave are not hungry for your blood. They are hungry for your resistance. Feed them resistance, and they will grow until they fill the cave. Feed them presence, your quiet, steady, open presence, and you will find, as Milarepa found, that they were never really monsters at all. They were invitations. Every fear is an invitation to become a little more whole. Every pain is a hand, writing your name, on the list of people who have been asked to grow. And you are on that list tonight. You have been on it for years. That is not a curse. That is the very reason you can hear this story and feel it ring true. There is one more gift in this story, and it is the deepest one, so lean in for it. When Milarepa first saw the demons, he tried to banish them with spells, and they would not leave. When he tried to defeat them with will, they grew. And when, at last, exhausted, he made them tea, when he opened his heart all the way, past his fear, to the very thing that frightened him, the demons did not simply vanish. They became something else. They changed shape in the old telling. Some say they became the sound of water. Some say they became light. But every version of the story agrees on the same strange fact. What had been terrifying became luminous. Now think about what that means. The very things you are carrying tonight, the grief you cannot unload, the fear you cannot name, the anger that keeps burning in its own small room. These are not obstacles between you and peace. They are the raw material of it. They are the wood from which your future steadiness will be carved. The person you will become, after this difficult season, will not be the person you would have been without it. It will be deeper, kinder, more patient, more able to sit with another human being in their own dark cave. The heart does not grow by being spared. It grows by being opened. And nothing opens a heart like sitting at a table with the thing you were afraid to face. Let me also tell you what the demons taught Milarepa about the morning. The cave, after that first night, was never again the enemy it had been. Oh, the cold remained. The wind remained. The difficult stretches of a long meditation life remained. They never leave anyone. But the cave became, for the rest of his days, simply his home. The same stones that had once held monsters held warmth. The same darkness that had once pressed against him now held the red glow of his little fire. Nothing outside the cave had changed. Everything inside it had. That is the promise of this teaching, and it is not a small promise. It is the whole promise. You do not need the world to change its weather for you to find peace. You need only to change which chair you sit in, inside your own house. This week, this month, this season of difficulty, it will be a cave either way. The only question is whether you will spend it as the man who was terrorized by his own mind, or the man who made tea for it. And you, my friend, are already becoming the second man. So tonight, when the last light goes out, and the cave of your own mind grows cool, and something shapes itself in the dark near the door of your thoughts, do not run. Do not arm yourself. Do not pick a fight you no longer need to win. Simply lean forward, across the small fire of yourself, and say it. Come in. It is cold, but there is room. Let us make tea. And the peace that life cannot break will begin, right there, in the space where you used to fight. There is a second story, older in its bones than the first, told quietly in many traditions and many lands. It is a short story, but it has a long shadow. And it begins, as so many stories do, with a man walking through a forest. The man was a traveler. He had been walking for days, following a road that grew narrower the farther it went, until it became a track, and then a thread, and then nearly nothing at all. His pack was light, his hope was heavier, and he was tired in that bone-deep way that comes not from one long day, but from many ordinary ones in a row. He was not a monk. He was not a student on a path to enlightenment. He was an ordinary man doing an ordinary thing, trying to get from one town to another, the way we all try to get from one day to the next. But as the road narrowed and the trees closed in around him, he heard a sound that stopped him cold. Behind him, in the forest, a low, patient, certain rumble. The sound came again, closer, and then he saw it, between the dark trunks, the orange and black shape of a tiger, a full-grown tiger, moving toward him the way weather moves. Steady, unhurried, certain. Now, the man knew the rules of the forest. You do not run from a sighted tiger, because a running creature is prey, and prey is chased. But the tiger gave a low grumble that told him something important. This tiger was not merely curious. This tiger had decided. And the man ran. He ran the way you run when there is only one thing in the world that matters, and it is the space between you and the teeth. He ran until his lungs burned, until the names of the trees blurred together. The track bent, and bent again, and ahead of him, the forest opened onto a cliff, a sheer wall of stone falling away into a wide green valley below. He skidded to a stop at the edge, gasping. Behind him, the tiger padded out of the trees, patient as sunrise. There was nowhere to go, no road onward, only the drop and the tiger. So the man did the only thing a stranded man can do. He went over the edge. He caught a root, then a vine, and he swung down the face of the cliff, far from the paws of the tiger, until he found a small ledge of stone just wide enough for his feet. And there, pressed against the cold rock, his heart hammering against his ribs, he hung. Above him, the tiger waited. It lay down at the edge of the cliff, a golden thundercloud at rest, patient as a mountain, and it watched him. It did not climb down. It did not need to. Time was on its side. The man could not climb up. The beast was faster. The man could not stay forever. His arms would tire. And then the man looked down and heard the second sound of the story. Below him, in the valley, there was mud. Great fields of it. Dark, deep, wet earth that swallowed the light. Thick as grief, still as sleep. And the man felt his whole body go cold, because he understood in that moment that whatever he did, whichever way he was driven, he would end up in that mud. The tiger above, the mud below, and only a narrow ledge between the teeth and the swallowing earth. Now, this is where most tellings of the story pause, to let you feel the hopelessness. And it is right that they pause, because we have all stood on that narrow ledge. We have all had the tiger above us and the mud below us. The tiger has 1,000 names: the bill, the diagnosis, the deadline, the loneliness that will not be consoled. And the mud is always the same, the dark, sticky, bottomless place we are afraid we will drown in. But the old story does not end in the hopelessness. It ends somewhere stranger. It ends in the mud. So let us go down into the valley and into the mud and see what the mud knows. In the story, the man's arms gave out. Not suddenly, not dramatically, not in a single heroic failure, just gradually, the way all strength gives out, the way youth gives out, the way time gives out. One hand slipped, then the other, and he fell. He fell the long, silent fall of every fall, the moment when the ground has already been chosen for you, and you are only catching up to it. And then he landed in the mud. And here's the part of the story that matters. The moment he landed, his whole instinct, his human, ancient, animal instinct, was to fight, to thrash, to swim against the mud with everything he had. His arms churned. His legs kicked. He drove himself up, 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 with the last reserves of the strength that had carried him through the forest. And the mud, thick and patient as everything that has ever been heavy, simply swallowed his movements. The more he fought, the deeper he sank. The harder he struggled, the faster the dark earth closed over his knees. He had been walking toward ruin for days, and now ruin had caught him, and he was fighting it with empty arms. Then, exhausted past the point of fear, past the point where the body gives its last, and the mind goes strangely quiet, the man stopped. He stopped thrashing. He stopped swimming. He stopped fighting the mud. He had nothing left. No plan. No strength. No argument. He simply surrendered to the dark earth and let it hold him. And the mud, this is the mystery, did not drown him. The mud held him. The mud, thick and patient, buoyed him. The man broke the surface of his own stillness and found that the earth that he had feared would swallow him had actually been the thing that kept him afloat. He lay back in the mud, spread-eagled and open, and the mud did what the mud does for everything that stops fighting it. It supported him. Above him, at the top of the cliff, the tiger rose, looked down once at the motionless man resting in the dark earth, and turned away. The chase was over for the tiger. There is no sport in prey that has stopped running. The tiger melted back into the forest like a thought dissolving, and it did not return. And the man lay there, in the mud that had tried to terrify him, and he understood in that slow, clear, strange way that exhaustion brings. The thing he had feared would swallow him had been supporting him the whole time. He had only ever sunk because he had fought. Now, let us put this story down, and let it teach us in its own slow way, because this story has something to say to every one of us who has ever tried to keep their head above the dark water. What is the mud in your life? Think quietly. Do not answer quickly. The mud is not always the big tragedy. Sometimes it is the long, ordinary heaviness that does not lift. It is the marriage that will not heal. It is the debt that will not shrink. It is the grief that comes back at the same hour every night, faithful as mail. It is the season of life that has gone on too long. It is the job that drains you, the doubt that dogs you, the body that fails you in small increments, day by day, until you wonder which day was the one that broke it. This is the mud, and we have all been taught, by our culture, by our childhoods, by our own proud hearts, that the only correct response to mud is to fight it, to struggle, to refuse it, to burn yourself alive, trying not to sink. But the old story asks a different question. A question as soft as fallen snow. What if the mud is not your enemy? What if the mud is only the dark, patient, difficult reality of your life, and your struggle against it is the only thing making you sink? Here is the truth that the fighting mind cannot see. Struggling does not change the mud. It never has. It never will. The grief will not leave because you wrestle it all night. The diagnosis will not rewind because you rage at it. The loss will not be undone by the ferocity of your refusal to accept it. The mud is what is, and what is mud. You can flail against it until your arms break, and it will not move 1 inch. But you can stop. You can stop, and this is not giving up. This is the deepest kind of wisdom. You can stop and let the mud hold you. Let me say that again, slowly, because it is the heart of this teaching. You cannot make the mud bear you by fighting it. The mud bears you when you stop fighting it. The things you cannot change are not asking for your permission. They are not asking for your consent. They are here. The way the season is here. The way your old shoe size is here. The way Monday is here. And against the things that are here, your energy has exactly one job, not to defeat them. You cannot, but to decide what to do with the force that would have gone into fighting them. The man in the mud spent his strength fighting and sank. Then he spent his strength not fighting and floated. It was the same strength, the same man, the same mud. The only thing that changed was where he pointed his effort. The whole difference between drowning and resting was a single change of direction, inward, where the fight had been, toward surrender. Now surrender, in this story, is not collapse. It is not giving in to despair. It is the opposite of despair. Despair is the belief that the mud will decide your fate. Surrender is the knowledge that you get to decide how you meet the mud, and the discovery that how you meet it changes everything. The man in the mud did not die. He rested. He rested in the thing he had feared all his life. And something remarkable happened in that rest. He found out that the mud was not hungry. It was not malevolent. It was not waiting for him to weaken so it could take him. The mud was only mud, dense, ordinary, heavy, endless. And when he stopped thrashing, it stopped being a grave and became a bed. This is a medicine some of us desperately need tonight. Because there may be someone listening who is fighting the mud right now, who has been fighting it for months, maybe years, who wakes up every morning and braces, like a boxer bracing for a bell that never rings, who has been told, by well-meaning voices, that they should be over it by now, should have moved on, should have bounced back, should be fine, and that someone has been thrashing for so long that they no longer know what it feels like to float. Tonight, the story gives you permission to stop, not to stop trying, not to stop living, not to stop loving or working or showing up, but to stop fighting the thing you cannot change. To say to the mud in your life, honestly, without drama, I cannot change you. I will not spend tonight hidden in this fight. I am going to lie down and let you hold me and see whether the peace I have been running from can find me here. The joy of this teaching is that it works. It works the way all true teachings work, quietly, physically, in the body. Because when you stop fighting, your shoulders drop. Your jaw unclenches. Your breath stops being borrowed and becomes yours again. And in that soft, dark, open place, the place where the fight used to live, something spacious arrives. Not happiness, not resolution, peace. Let us borrow one more image from the old story, because it carries the teaching all the way home. Above the man in the mud, on the cliff, the tiger waited. The tiger in our story has a name too, and that name is fear. Fear is the tiger, not the mud. Look closely. The tiger is what pushed the man over the edge. The tiger is what he could not face. The tiger is what made him end up, dripping and shaking, in the middle of the dark earth he had always dreaded. Again and again in your life, it is the tiger, fear, that drives you into the mud you were trying to avoid. Fear of the outcome, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of pain. The tiger always herds you toward the thing it wants you to believe will destroy you. But here is what the story shows you, quietly, in its final scene. The tiger cannot enter the mud. Look again at that last image, the golden beast standing above, watching the man who has stopped moving. The tiger does not climb down. It cannot. Whatever sends fear cannot follow you into your surrender. Fear needs a running creature, a thrashing creature, a creature who believes the mud is a grave. The moment you stop running and stop thrashing, the moment you begin to float, the tiger genuinely loses you. Fear cannot live where there is no fight. That is the sudden, luminous secret the story has been carrying toward you all these minutes. Fear is not an appetite that follows you anywhere. It is a game. It requires two players, the tiger and the fighter. And you always had the power to stop playing. You could sit down in the mud at any time. You could look at the fear above you and say, I am done running. I am done fighting. I will rest where I am, in what is, and let the dark earth decide how much it loves me. And the dark earth will love you very much. It will hold you. It already is holding you, every night, whether you know it or not. It is what has kept you from breaking all this time under everything. The mud in your life is not the wall you are sinking into. It is the ground that has been carrying you since the day you were born. Now, let us be careful, because this teaching has sometimes been misunderstood, and misunderstandings can be cruel. The story is not saying, accept the unacceptable silently. It is not saying, do not reach for help, do not change what can be changed, do not fight for what is worth fighting for. That is not surrender. That is abandonment, and the Buddha never taught abandonment. The teaching of the mud is about a specific moment, the moment when you have already done the work. You have seen the doctor. You have called the friend. You have changed what was changeable. You have spoken the truth you had to speak. And still the mud remains. Still the grief sits down at your table. Still the loss is the shape of your life. It is precisely then that the old story has its medicine. Because that is the moment when fighting tilts into waste, when struggle becomes its own wound, when the same energy that carried you through the forest begins to drag you down. And it is that moment, the moment after you have done everything, that you are held now. Tonight, you get to do the one thing you have never truly allowed yourself. Stop and float. You do not have to feel better about the mud. The story does not ask that of you. You only have to stop fighting it. Stop negotiating with it. Stop begging the tiger to leave. Let your arms fall open. Let your legs go soft. Let your breath slow until you can feel the dark earth rising up to meet you, the way it rises to meet the roots of every old tree, the way it rises to meet the knees of every prayer. And in that stillness, you may notice something moving toward you. Not the tiger. Something older. Something that has been waiting for you in the mud you feared so much the whole time. It is rest itself. Real rest. The kind you have not let yourself have since the trouble started. And it will hold you, the way it held the man in the story, until the tiger goes away on its own, and the night passes, and the morning comes looking for you right where you are. Let the mud hold you tonight. You have been so brave for so long, fighting what cannot be fought. And before you stop, let me share one more turn of this story, because there is a detail that the anxious heart must hear. The mud in the story was not the whole world. Remember that. The valley had other ground in it. Grass, rock, the far hills, the road the traveler eventually took. The mud was one field, and it was the field he landed in, and it was the field that held him until he could leave. In the same way, the pain you are carrying tonight is not the whole landscape of your life. It is a field. A real field, yes. A field you did not choose. A field that has taken more of your years than you ever planned. But it is still one field, and beyond it the rest of your life is already waiting for you, patient as distant hills. Do not mistake the field you are passing through for the whole of the country. You are bigger than the mud, and your life is bigger than this season, and both are waiting for you to stop fighting long enough to see it. And in some old tellings, the traveler does not lie in the mud forever. After he has rested, after the tiger leaves and the night passes, he rises. He walks out of the mud, not because he fought it, because the mud, once it held him, let him go. It returns every traveler to the shore when the traveler stops sinking. The mud was never a jail. It was a lesson with a door. Carry that with you tonight. Your dark season is not your final address. It is a room you pass through, and you pass through it fastest not by raging against its walls, but by sitting down in it and letting it become the floor you stand on once more. The quiet surrender of tonight is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the rest of it. The mud releases what it loves, and it loves everything that stops fighting to escape it. So rest here, my friend. With this freedom, you are not stuck. You are gathering stillness. The mud is not the grave you feared. It is the ground you have been standing on all your life, and tonight, for the first time in a long, long while, you get to feel it hold you. You can stop now. There is a third story, and of all three, it is the one the heart needs most when the hurting goes quiet, when the acute storm has passed, and you are left in the strange, gray, tired season afterward. It is the story of a gardener, and his garden, and the long patience of the earth. Once there was a gardener who loved his garden more than you, and I might believe a man could love a patch of soil. He was not a rich man. He had no titles, no treasures, no heirs. What he had was his garden, and the garden, for years, had repaid him. It had given him squash and beans and the long green runners of his favorite things. The garden had been his livelihood and his comfort, the bank of his hopes and the theater of his quiet joys. Then came the dry season. It came slowly, as dry seasons do, the way grief comes, a little less rain in April, then a little less in May, then a brutal June, and then a July so hot that the leaves of the garden began to hold their breath. The gardener did everything he knew. He hauled water from the well twice a day. He mulched his rows with straw. He rose before dawn to beat the heat. But the sun was patient and enormous, and water was scarce, and the garden, season by season, grew tired. He had saved seeds, of course. Seeds are the gardener's promise to the future. He had carried them from his best squash, his best beans, his best and longest runners. And in the dry year, the year the garden gave him almost nothing, he went out one evening in the long red light and planted every seed he had. Every one. Because a gardener plants even in the dry season. Because that is what a gardener is, someone who believes the earth will turn. He planted the seeds deep enough, just as his father had taught him. He watered them. He waited. Days passed. No green. He watered more. He checked the rows every morning with a pounding heart. The earth stayed dark, packed, patient, silent. And the gardener began, in the way of men who are gentle and worried, to doubt. Did I plant them too deep? He asked himself. Did I wait too long? Was the sun too much for them before they even woke? And then he did the thing that gardeners in trouble do. He dug the seeds up, gently, carefully, like a surgeon uncovering a small heart. He brushed the soil away from the seeds and held them in his palm. They were hard, smooth, unchanged. They had not rotted, but they had not sprouted either. They were just waiting. He looked at them for a long time. Then he covered them again, deeper this time, patted the earth down, and watered them again. They did not sprout. So he dug them up again, and looked, and covered them again, and watered them again. This went on for weeks. Every few days, the gardener's hands would go into the earth, and his worry would go with them. He could not let the seeds be. He loved them too much. He feared for them too deeply. And each time he uncovered them, he delayed their whole life. Because a seed that is being handled cannot root. A seed that is being interrogated cannot send its first white thread down into the dark. A seed needs to be left alone. It needs trust. The seeds needed the gardener to stop loving them with his hands and start loving them with his patience. And of course, the seeds were not the only things in the garden that year that needed that. Now, there is another character in this story, one the old tellings often mention in passing, and they are right too, the gardener's old neighbor. A woman who had lived beside him for 40 years, had seen his garden green and his garden gray, and who knew the earth the way you know an old friend's habits. And one evening, when she found the gardener kneeling in the dark, brushing the soil from seeds that he had planted and replanted for the 4th time, she sat down beside him. "Neighbor," she said gently, "what are you doing?" "I cannot get them to grow," he said. "I plant them, and nothing comes." She reached over and took one of the seeds from his palm. She turned it over between her fingers, the way you turn a coin, and then she said the words. That loosened the whole story. "Seed, why did you cry?" The gardener looked at her, not understanding. The old woman began to speak, and she spoke the way old neighbors speak, not to lecture, but to remember out loud. You plant in the dry season, she said. The seed knows the rain is coming. It feels the season turning, the way you feel a train before it arrives. And it waits. It gathers. It stays small and hard and patient down there in the dark, building up the quiet courage it will need to break its own shell. But you will not let it wait. You dig it up to see if it loves you back. You unearth it to test its progress. And every time you do, you tear the little thing away from the dark it must trust in order to grow. The seed does not need to be watched. It needs to be believed. The gardener sat back in the dust of his row and let the words settle into him the way water settles into dry soil. And at last, in a small voice, he said, "But what if it never rains?" And the old woman smiled, the way old women smile at the last question in a long lesson. "Then you will have watered it," she said, "and watered it, and watered it, and all that water will still be going somewhere. Nothing you pour into the earth is ever lost. The soil will remember. And when the rain comes, and the rain always comes, the sky always turns, the wheel always turns, the ground you kept soft will be ready. Ready for everything you have been carrying all along." The gardener did not dig the seeds up again. He could not tell you exactly when trust replaced the fear. It happened slowly, the way all deep changes happen, the way the dry season itself ends. But he stopped kneeling in the dark with his hands in the earth, and he began kneeling, instead, with his hands folded. He watered, he weeded, he waited, and he trusted, and the rain came. It came in the way rain always comes to the desert of the heart, not as a gift, but as a memory, a remembering, as if the sky had simply decided, at last, to pay an old debt. It came gently at first, a mist, a rumor of wetness, and then it came properly, long and patient and holy, until the whole valley smelled of released earth. And in the garden that had suffered the dry season, under the attention of the soft new ground, the seeds that had waited began, quietly, desperately, beautifully, to swell. And they grew, not hurriedly, not on schedule, not to prove anything. They grew the way things grow in the story, because they had been planted and watered, and this was the part that saved them, believed in. The gardener built his squash from those seeds, and his beans, and his long green runners. His garden returned greener than before the hardship, because every drop he had poured into the dry ground had gone somewhere, had been remembered, had been preparing the earth to receive the rain. And the gardener, when his students asked him later how he had held on through the dry season, did not give them a technique. He gave them a hand, open and empty, and a quiet word. "I buried my seeds," he said, "and then I let them grow alone. Because you cannot call the green out of the ground with your worry. You can only tend the ground and trust the season." Now let us sit with this story, because of all the stories tonight, it is the gentlest, and very often the most needed. Here is what the garden is, your healing. Here is what the dry season is, the long stretch after a loss, an illness, a betrayal, an ending. The stretch when you have done everything right and still feel nothing, still see nothing, still find no green above the ground of your own days. And here, if you can bear it, is who you are in this story. You are the gardener. You were never the soil. You were never the seed. You are the one who plants, waters, and waits. And the whole drama of your heart tonight, the reason you feel so helpless, so broken, so stuck in the gray, is that you have been doing the gardener's most dangerous act, digging up the seeds in order to check whether you are healing. Think of how you have been checking on your heart lately. You wake up and you scan yourself for feelings, the way you might scan the ground for buds. Am I better today? They ask. Is the grief lighter yet? Do I feel less broken? And when the scan comes back gray, when the morning brings no green, when the hurt is still damp and raw under your careful questions. You are crushed. You conclude that you are failing, that your seeds are dead, that the dryness is your fault or your fate. But look at what you have done. You have done the one thing the gardener learned not to do. You have unearthed yourself, over and over, to check for progress. You have pulled your tender heart out of the dark where the healing actually happens. And healing happens in the dark, unhurried, unseen, and you have held it up to the light, and you have been disappointed. The seed is not failing because it has not sprouted. The seed is doing precisely what it must do. It is gathering. It is holding. It is working underground, in the only place a seed can work. The dead season of your heart is not an empty season. It is the darkest, most fertile hour of the whole garden. Your heart knows how to heal the way the seed knows how to grow. It does not need your management. It does not need your daily inspection. It does not need you to rise every morning and dig it up and ask, "Are you better yet?" It needs the gardener's real work. It needs watering. It needs the warmth of rest. It needs to be left alone, buried in the dark of a heart that trusts its own season. So let us speak directly to the dry season. Some of you listening are in it now. It has been weeks, maybe months, maybe years. The acute pain has dulled, as all acute things dull, but what is left is gray, an absence of color. Not depression exactly, not grief, not exactly. Just a long plain of nothing after the mountain passes. And you have been waiting to feel green again, and the green will not come. And you have begun to fear that the green is gone forever, that your seeds were dead after all, that the sky has finished with you. Listen to the gardener's neighbor. The rain always comes. The season always turns. The wheel always turns. That is not a wish. It is a fact of how living things are made. Nothing stays dry forever, because dryness is not the end of the story. Dryness is the middle of the story, the part where the hero is underground, and the eye of the camera stays on the clouds, and every waiting watcher has to believe. Your seeds are not dead. They have never been dead. You have simply been looking for the wrong thing, in the wrong place, at the wrong time of the season. The green does not come from being watched. It comes from being trusted. And there is an even deeper teaching here, more subtle than the first, and if you catch it, it will keep you for the rest of your life. The teaching is this: the gardener's worry was not about the seeds. It was about himself. He was not protecting his garden. He was protecting his own fear. Every time he dug the seeds up, he was asking them to prove that he was safe, that his hope was not foolish, that his devotion was not wasted. The seeds owed him nothing, but his terrified heart kept going into the ground to collect its proof. Your heart does this too. When you demand visible progress from your healing, you are not loving yourself better. You are auditing yourself for safety. You are trying to extract from your own pain a guarantee that you will be all right. And the ancients would tell you, gently, there are no guarantees. The guarantee you are seeking is in the ground, not in the green. It is in the seed that has decided, before any of us can see it, to remain a seed. Can you make peace with a healing you cannot see? Can you water the garden without needing the buds to appear by Tuesday? Can you lie down in your night, in your sorrow, in your dry season, and say the words that save the gardener? I will tend the ground and trust the season. I will not dig myself up to check on myself. I will let the dark do its work. I will be patient with the making of me. This is the medicine of the third story, and it is the medicine the heart needs last and longest. For the mind, the first story gives tea with the monsters. For the body, the second story gives rest in the mud. But for the long middle, for the months when nothing happens, for the gray, for the waiting, for the slow return, the third story gives you the gardener's two hands and the trust to keep them clean and folded, while the earth below does its holy work. You have been watered, friend, by your courage, by your friendships, by your own daily, unspectacular showing up. All of it has gone somewhere. The ground has remembered every drop. And when your rain comes, and it will come, it is already on its way. The clouds are already gathering at the far edge of your life. You will be ready. The earth you have kept soft will be ready, and you will grow again, not in spite of the dry season, because of it. Because everything that ever grew green in this world grew through a seed that was willing to wait in the dark, and a gardener who was brave enough to believe. There is a word for what the gardener finally learned, and the old traditions keep it in many languages. It is patience, but patience with its teeth taken out. Not the patience of waiting bitterly, watching the clock, checking the sky. The patience of the farmer. The patience that does the daily work and then truly lets go of the outcome. The seed is tended in the morning and forgotten at noon, not because the farmer does not love it, but because the farmer knows that loving it better means trusting it more. Your heart deserves that farmer's trust. You have watered yourself enough to begin. The rest of the work is the grounds, and the seasons, and the skies. Let them have their share. So tonight, if you have been digging yourself up to check on your own healing, stop. Cover your seeds gently. Water them, and then fold your hands, and let the season turn without your help. The green will come. It always comes. The rain always arrives for the garden that was loved through the dry time. And so, tonight, we have climbed to a mountain cave and made tea with monsters. We have fallen into the dark mud and discovered that it holds us when we stop fighting it. We have knelt in a dry garden and buried seeds in the earth and trusted the season. 3 stories, and one quiet thread running through them all, like a silver line through dark water. Peace does not mean the absence of pain. That is the first lie we must always refuse. The people who live stillest are not the people who have suffered least. They are the people who have found a way to be whole inside their suffering. The monk in the cave was not peaceful because the demons never came. He was peaceful because he met them with tea. The man in the mud was not peaceful because he escaped the tiger. He was peaceful because he stopped fighting the place he landed. The gardener was not peaceful because the rain arrived on his schedule. He was peaceful because he trusted it while it was still far away. This is the peace that life cannot break. It does not depend on the weather. It does not depend on the news. It does not depend on your luck, your health, or the people around you. It is a relationship you build with your own condition, a quiet skill of the heart. And like every skill, it is learned the same way, slowly, imperfectly, one night at a time. You can carry it into your worst day. You already have everything you need to carry it. Not new information, not a brighter circumstance, just the old, deep understanding that you do not have to fight what you cannot change, and that being with a thing, truly with it, without flinching, changes the thing itself. So tonight, let your heart practice. Let the lessons settle the way settled water clears. When the fear arrives, invite it for tea. Say to it, softly, the way Milarepa spoke to his monsters, come in. The fire is small. There is room. I will not fight you tonight. And watch, without expectation, what peace opens in the space where the fight used to live. When the heavy, dark, unchangeable weight comes, the mud you cannot escape, let yourself be held by it instead of wrestling it. Do not try to feel better yet. Do not demand that the pain move. Only stop, as the traveler stopped, and let the dark earth support you. Rest is not retreat. Rest is not surrender. Rest is the oldest wisdom in the body, and it is waiting for you. And when the gray season comes, the long, silent stretch when nothing seems to change and healing feels like a rumor, remember the gardener. Do not dig up your seeds to check on them. Do not unearth your heart each morning to demand progress. Water what you can, do what the day asks of you, and then fold your hands and trust the ground. The green will come. The rain always arrives for the garden that was loved through the dry time. You have been so brave for so long, fighting what cannot be fought, checking on wounds that need the dark, carrying both the pain and the fear of the pain, which is double the weight. Tonight, you can set it down. Not the situation, that stays as it is. But the fight, you can set down. The watching, you can set down. The demand that life be different before you are allowed to rest, you can set that down too. There is a peace that has always lived underneath your suffering. Not after your suffering. Underneath it. The way the still water lives underneath the storm. The way the seed lives underneath the frost. It is not something you must earn by fixing your life. It is something you may simply open your hand to receive, even tonight, even now, even here, in the middle of everything. Let your breath slow. Let your shoulders drop. Let your mind, which has been working so hard, finally put down its tools. You are not broken. You are not behind schedule. You are a seed in the dry season, doing the most important work you will ever do, staying alive, in the dark, with trust. And the sky remembers you. May your night be gentle. May your monsters become companions. May the mud hold you like a mother. May the green come when it comes, and not a moment sooner, because you are worth the whole journey, and the whole season is yours. Thank you for resting with us. If these stories brought you even a moment of ease, please subscribe. More teachings are always on the way, for the peace that life cannot break. Rest now. Sleep peacefully. Namaste.